Hey folks, this is Saturday, August, 15? And this is the daily word in the crisis. Romans 13, 3 and 4. That's one that a lot of people quote these days, and so I want to start by parsing that a little bit. For rulers are not a cause of fear for good behavior, but for evil. Do you want to have no fear of authority? Do what is good, and you will have praise from the same. For it is a minister of God to you for good, but if you do what is evil, be afraid. For it does not bear the sword for nothing. For it is a minister of God, an avenger who brings wrath on the one who practices evil. So let me parse that carefully, because I believe these two verses are badly used to apply in ways they're not supposed to. The legitimate function of government, according to those verses, is to bear the sword against evil, and to deal with those who practice evil, not to control our lives. Now let me say that again. The legitimate function of government is to bear the sword against evil and to deal with those who practice evil, not to control our lives. This pandemic has been designed and manipulated to condition us to accept a shift of the role of government from avenging evil, from protecting our liberties and fostering our freedoms, to regulating our lives, our relationships, and our conduct of business, all through fear. Beware, America. The next election will determine how far this shift is allowed to go. Now, we boomers, I'm almost 69 years old, so we boomers, born between about 1945 and 1962, we were the generation who learned that government cannot be trusted. We knew we were being lied to about the Vietnam War, and we took to the streets to protest. We knew there was racial injustice, and we rose up to march, and we worked to overcome it, even as government forces seemed to oppose the effort. Our soldiers came home from the war, wounded in body, spirit, heart, and mind. We knew that what had happened stemmed from corrupt motives and lies, and we mostly vowed never to trust a government again. Back then, we protested being drafted to fight a war we couldn't believe in. No matter how you phrase it, the draft was government coercion into sacrificing our lives for a cause we knew was wrong. It was deprivation of choice in the name of freedom. So we rose up as a generation and we cried out no until the government listened and we withdrew from Vietnam. This same generation today, listen to me, this same generation today lives under an even greater and more widespread coercion and abridgment of our freedoms. Choice has been taken from us, and we're being forced by our governments into behaviors we feel are unjust and unjustified. And it is causing different forms of damage to our bodies, our spirits, our hearts, and our minds. Today, in the midst of this, our government is demonstrably more corrupt and compromised than it was in the days of our youth. And yet most of my generation, who once were rebels in a righteous cause, have chosen to trust a government that has not earned our trust. National government in the 60s and 70s tried to tell us that we were fighting an enemy in Vietnam that would overwhelm us if we didn't stop them, and they tried to make the war sound all patriotic. The older generation told us we should have been happy to go to fight for our freedom in that far-off land, but masses of us knew we were being lied to, not only about why we were there, but about how the war was being conducted. We rose up as a generation, and we said no. Today, you're supposed to be happy to lose your business and your job, all that you worked for all your life, your home, your livelihood, because there's this awful virus out there and we're in this together. You've heard that one, right? In this together? And while people are committing suicide and others die from issues related to the stress of all this, and while drug use soars, domestic violence rises exponentially, and children suffer in a multitude of ways, Dr. Fauci tells us it's just an inconvenience. That was his word. An inconvenience suffered for the collective good. How much more out of touch can you get? Pardon me, but I won't listen to a word he says anymore. Do we not realize what is happening now? How have we come to trust and believe the narrative from a political structure shot through with corruption? Now, please understand, I'm not pointing the finger at Donald Trump. He promised to drain the swamp. He's fought to do that, and the swamp is fighting back with every weapon at their disposal. Every day, another scandal is exposed, going back through the Obama years and beyond. If you haven't heard about it, it's because mainstream media doesn't want you to hear about it. But it's coming out anyway. The deep state drives the boat in Washington, D.C., and determines the narrative, and the mainstream media aid and abet that. But the boat is leaking from 100 holes if you're paying attention. And yet we comply. Too many believe what we're being told, even as truth about the real numbers related to COVID-19 is being released, even as an increasing number of reputable physicians tout the effectiveness of chloroxychloroquine to very quickly bring recovery from COVID-19. And yet that drug it's been safely used for 70 years to treat a variety of illnesses and conditions is widely forbidden and denied now. Doctors fear losing their licenses for prescribing it. Pharmacists refuse to fill the prescriptions. If it was never dangerous before, then suppose they're telling us it's dangerous now. Have you even asked why? Are you woke yet? Isn't it time for a generation of cultural revolutionaries who've laid down their generational calling to rise once more and say no? Isn't it past time that we begin to question why mainstream media is not telling us that more than half of those who have died of COVID-19 were elderly nursing home patients? Why is Governor Cuomo in New York allowed to continue to blame President Trump for the deaths that happened in New York nursing homes when he, not Trump, was responsible for signing the order for COVID patients to be sent to nursing homes where the most vulnerable are housed? Are you seeing so far why I don't believe that Romans 13 applies today? Why are we not permitted to hear or truly weigh the testimony of men like Dr. Scott Atlas, senior fellow at the Hoover Institute at Stanford University, who say that these draconian measures and social distancing practices are the wrong way to deal with this? Highly placed medical professionals like this say that we are saving no one's lives with the closures and lockdowns, but we are rather simply spreading the death and destruction over a longer period of time while destroying the lives of tens of millions of Americans through the economic fallout. They say that exposure to the virus would bring herd immunity, and we would end this more quickly. But their words and testimonies are often blocked on social media. You probably won't hear a word they have to say on the more left-leaning mainstream news channels either, because they don't want you to know. When was the last time you heard anyone talking about how Sweden never did shut down, how they did have a higher rate of infection and fatalities at first, but now they have significant herd immunity and their numbers are well below those of other European and Scandinavian nations? They don't want you to know these things. It wouldn't serve the purpose of conditioning a population of slumbering rebels to willingly accept and submit to the loss of the freedoms they fought for in their youth. It doesn't serve the agenda of control, and it doesn't sustain the crisis they've calculated to drive Donald Trump from office. We still have a vote. Use it in November, Americans. Well, that's the end of the rant for today. I hope that your churches are opening and that you will attend. And God bless you tomorrow.